Baldur's Gate 3 dev explains why video games should cost more. He said, oh, heck. So, Larian, right? Larian is the Baldur's Gate 3 developer / publisher, and they are going to explain here why video games should cost more. Now, this is going to, in my opinion, what we're in store for here is this can be taken in a lot of different ways. As I'll tell you up front, I think that Larian's games probably are worth more than what they like. Take Baldur's Gate 3 for example. That game was $40 in early access, if I remember correctly, which is what Pinky said earlier as well. It's a $50 full price game. No, $60 full price game, right? $60 full price game. We looked it up earlier. $60 full price game, I think, and then you can pay $70 for the deluxe version, which gets you a lot of additional, basically like collector's edition. You got the soundtrack, you get artwork, you get in-game cosmetics. There's all kinds of stuff, right? So even for just the base game of Baldur's Gate 3, which is all the content, right? It's $60. Not even the normal current AAA price tag. And it's an insane amount of content, right? So not only for a single playthrough, which you can easily hit, 150 to 200 hours worth of game time, but the replayability is absolutely there in this game. Their most recent release. So you're talking about a $60 price tag for a game like that's quite incredible. And so when you talk about Larian speaking to the sentiment of maybe games of that caliber that they're creating being worth a higher price tag, I don't necessarily disagree with that, especially because you're talking about Larian in a company and a developer and a publisher that isn't really interested in monetization, microtransactions, any of that kind of stuff. No, they're not interested in the battle pass stuff or basically what you see is what you get, right? So to that extent, I agree. I think their games are absolutely worth more most of the time, especially when you're talking about something like Baldur's Gate 3, the Divinity games, stuff like that, right? And now, that is in stark contrast to most of the developers that we see nowadays, right? Most of the developers we see nowadays are going to nickel and dime you to death with monetization. So you talk about usually a developer of the caliber of Larian, right? Being AAA, they're going to release their games at a $70 price point, which is the standard for AAA now. And then they do things like what we're seeing with Star Wars Outlaws right now, where they're already telling you they've got DLC planned to come out next quarter and the following quarter, and you know that DLC is already finished. That content's done. What they did was they made it in a way to bait people into buying more content for the game. And it's based around things like Lando Calrissian and Jabba the Hutt, which are characters that they know people love in that universe. Now, is that content going to be expansion type content that's absolutely worth the money, or is it literally them just baiting people into buying content based around those characters that people love? We see it happen all the time, right? So whether you want to talk about these DLC scams that get played all the time, or you want to talk about battle passes, or you want to talk about games being built around mechanics, single player games being built around mechanics for microtransactions that should never be there. Dragon's Dogma 2, okay? Yes, you can get through that game without buying any microtransactions, but why are there microtransactions in that game in the first place? They built mechanics in that game to make you feel like you'll have a better quality of life if you buy into them. It's disgusting. Shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be there at all. And you're paying AAA price tag up front, and then they're trying to make you feel like you're going to have a better time if you buy microtransactions while you're playing the game as well, right? So There's all kinds of ways, you know, subscriptions and you know, battle passes, microtransactions. I mean, you name it. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. So Larian's in a bit of a different category here than a lot of these other companies are in regards to why video games should potentially, I'm going to throw a word into this title, why video games should potentially cost more in regards to Larian. And yeah, I agree. They should probably be charging more for their games. You want to talk about some of these other companies like WB? Should they be charging more for their... No, they should probably be charging less, right? It's all relative, I think. It's all relative to the amount of quality content you're getting out of a game. And I talk about this all the time. Whether you're talking about indie titles, free-to-play games, AAA games, right? It's all relative to the amount of content you're getting out of that game. And I say this constantly and consistently. If you're playing a free-to-play game and you've got hundreds of hours out of it, have you taken a step back, taken a breath, and thought, I should probably support this developer? Because that's an appropriate thing to consider. As opposed to AAA games nowadays, which are $70 most of the time. They're riddled with microtransactions and monetization, and you're getting less gameplay time out of them than we ever have before, which is down to roughly an average of 15 to 20 hours most of the time. Not always, but most of the time, the average gameplay you're getting out of a AAA game nowadays is 15 to 20 hours. And you're paying 70, if not more, for that. At the very least, 70 usually. So how does that compute? It doesn't. It doesn't. In relation to the fact that you're playing free-to-play games for hundreds of hours and not giving anything back. I think it's appropriate for all of us to take a hard look at, you know, are we supporting the right kinds of developers? Are we supporting appropriately for the right kinds of content and the right developers that are doing the right things by us as consumers? Because it's a very, you know, complex situation for us to address, but it's an appropriate one. It's a little bit different for everybody, respectively, because we all have, you know, a different kind of budget scenario where money means different things to all of us. But I do think it's something that we should all be taking into consideration, as it means a lot. And it affects the way these developers approach us with how much content we're getting for how much money we're paying. That's why we are where we are right now as consumers in this industry. So, should video games cost more than they currently do? A senior Baldur's Gate 3 developer thinks so. According to the developer, almost all games cost less these days than they should. He believes Rockstar Games' upcoming GTA 6 will change how games are priced when it launches. I agree. Here's the difference. I've said this for a long time now. I think that GTA 6 is going to definitely cost more than the current AAA price tag as a base game. And then, with everything else that it entails and everything else that they know they can monetize with it, it's going to absolutely also change the way monetization occurs for these types of titles. Now, the difference being, GTA 6 is a very unique GTA as a whole. Whether you talk about GTA 5, obviously, GTA 6, it's a very unique and different kind of title than most developers have in their portfolio. It's not as easy for other developers to take even some of their top games and monetize it in the way that Rockstar is going to do GTA, because their titles aren't as unique as this. It's just a fact. But I still see it happen. So Rockstar is going to come out. They're going to change the landscape of basically what we know of how a game has been released monetarily, retail-wise, as well as how it's going to be monetized after the fact too. I do believe that. what's going to be weird is we're going to see all these other developers come in after the fact and try to emulate that when they don't have the same kind of content. So they think that Rockstar is going to come out and change the landscape for them, when for us, it shouldn't be that way. Again, all of this is in relation to what are you getting out of that product. And if all of these developers and publishers think that Rockstar is just going to change the landscape for them, no matter what their content is, no matter what their game is, that is not the way this should work. The perspective comes from Michael Dowse, known as Cromwell on Twitter, who serves as the director of publishing at Larian Studios. The conversation began in a Twitter thread where Dowse agreed that games should charge customers more at a base level due to rising development costs. He added that the games should be priced according to their quality, breadth, and depth. Interesting. Seems very similar to what I was just saying, right? And that squeezing every game into certain price brackets doesn't make sense to him. Basically exactly what I was saying as well. I agree. The reason for this discussion was the base $70 price tag of Star Wars Outlaws, which has a $130 US asking price for its Ultimate Edition, which is absolutely disgusting. And a lot of this monetization tactic revolves around these games that get hyped up and marketed as such to entice people to buy into the 2 to 3 days of early access, where you're just a final beta tester. And most of the time, the game is a broken dumpster fire during that period. Whether it be because of server issues or because, like we saw with Star Wars Outlaws, things like the save files have a bug that is game breaking, and they basically come out and say, hey, we need you to start all the way over after you've spent double-digit hours already playing that game. Nobody should be buying into these early access gimmicks. It's terrible. Dowse maintained that such high prices are often justified by companies with vague promises about content. Agreed, making the $70 price tag seem more reasonable. The pricing dilemma. Dowse went further, suggesting that Rockstar Games' GTA 6, one of the most anticipated games of our time, will have a major impact on how video games are priced when it finally releases. Due to the enormous hype surrounding it, GTA 6 could very well become the best-selling entertainment product of all time. Given Rockstar Games' track record and the quality their products typically offer, many are likely willing to pay a premium. Yep, but this could set a dangerous precedent for the industry. If the base game is priced at an exorbitant amount, as many expect, it might force other developers to follow suit. It will not force them to. I do not think that's the correct word or verbiage. I think that it is going to make them delusional about the fact of they think they will get away with a higher price tag as well. And it will be to their detriment because they don't have the same kind of content. However, gamers are not easily fooled. If they don't believe a game is worth the asking price, they won't buy it. Even the now standard $70 price tag remains a contentious issue for many gamers today. And to that, add to that the frustration over microtransactions and live service models, and it's clear the gaming community is fed up with the increasing cost. The gaming community often resists companies' attempts to raise prices for their games or services. It remains to be seen how the industry will react to GTA 6's pricing and what it might mean for the future of video game pricing. Baldur's Gate 3, absolute banger, and absolutely worth more than they sell it for, IMO. But nowadays it seems drastically fewer and further between that we have games come out where what you are paying for is even appropriate for what you're getting. And I do think that it is ultimately very important that all of us as gaming enthusiasts and consumers stay very, diligent about the way that we're spending our money in regards to the kinds of content we're getting out of our video game entertainment. Absolutely.